So the auxiliary, let's focus on that for a second. The auxiliary is something that's very important because it's something that people tend to forget. And now let me show you what I mean. Now I mentioned être and I mentioned avoir. So this is exactly all the information that you need to know. You have être. You need to know this. You need to know that the present tense of the verb être goes like this. Je suis, tu es, il, elle, on est, nous sommes, vous êtes, and il and elle sont. Okay? If you know that, you already know the verb être, which is fantastic, which means that whenever you decide to use the verb être as your auxiliary verb, you've already got 50% of it. You just need to figure out the auxiliary part. Okay? Now, for avoir, this is what you need to know. This is the present tense of the verb avoir. It goes like this. J'ai, so I have. Tu as. Il, elle, or on a. Nous avons. Vous avez. And il, elle, on. Okay? This is screenshot time. Okay, so take a screenshot of this. That is what you need to know. You need to just memorize this. Okay? Je suis, tu es, il est, nous sommes, vous êtes, ils sont, and the same for avoir. Now, when people explain the passé composé, and you may have heard this before, someone's tried to explain it. Some people say, okay, the passé composé is made up of 3 parts. Now, that is technically true because we have this part, and then we have our past participle. Okay? Now we have our auxiliary. So what is this first part? Well, this first part is actually just called the subject. But if you learn the subject with the auxiliary as sort of one package, it feels like it's less information to learn because you've only got 2 parts instead of 3 parts to remember. Okay? Now, the title of this video is Don't Forget the Auxiliary. And the reason for that is because a lot of people actually do forget it. The auxiliary is kind of what connects the subject to the past participle. Okay? Without the auxiliary in the middle, it doesn't work, right? Now, let's take this example here. Now, this is an example where people forget it all the time. You have this je, and then you have this, which is your auxiliary part, and then you have a past participle. For example, manger. That's an example of a past participle. Now, a lot of people forget the auxiliary. So they write something like this. Je mangeais. Now, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't work because you only have your subject and you have your past participle. You're actually missing this part in the middle, the auxiliary. Okay? So if it helps as a checklist to remember, okay, the passé composé is made up of 3 parts, number 1, number 2, number 3, being the subject, the auxiliary, and the past participle, that's fine. You can also remember it as, okay, the passé composé is made up of 2 parts, number 1 and number 2, the auxiliary, which is all of this, right? That's an example here, and the past participle. Whatever you prefer to help you memorize that is fine.